morning, everybody. Just a quick announcement here again about my website, ag-wx.com. I'm having some problems with the European model. I was having problems with the PRISM data. I'm also having problems with the data that's used to make my current temperature maps. It's been a rough week, but I want to tell you something. Don't go to the site right now and look at anything from the European model. Amazon's AWS system is having a problem right now with copying files properly from the European Center all the way over to my S3 bucket. So my code, which I write on an EC2 instance to make all of these maps for us, is going back and looking for the right kind of file string, the name of the file, and it's finding last year's data. So if you come here and you're like, well, I want to see the newest European model, and you're curious, it's actually last year's data. So that's what it was doing a year ago right now, just in case you're curious. So just please understand not to use the site until I take down this disclaimer at the top, and we'll have this all resolved. So I'm working on it hard right now. Okay, we've got a lot of things going on, so let's get back into this. This morning, as the sun is rising here on the East Coast, you can see the upper level low that's spinning here. This is the one that produced all the strong winds yesterday, coming out of parts of Montana, and then moved across the plains and the Midwest, delivering some rainfall. Well, let's just go back a little bit here. I want to show you this as the sun was setting last night. So it was a pretty decent low here. Kind of starved for moisture, but still a deeper low. As I was watching this, I was noticing how strong the upper level winds are coming over the Rocky Mountains in Montana. There's just some incredibly strong winds here coming over this next ridge, a part of that second wave of the positive PNA pattern. Remember us talking about that earlier in the week. But upon closer inspection out here in the west, I did notice that in California, let me take you back to yesterday, we had a few large wildfires show up. Now, this has not been a year of extensive wildfire across California. I was worried about it because with as much precipitation as we saw back in spring, I thought with all the new vegetation growth, we would have a pretty rough fire season. But in the middle of it, remember, we had Hillary, the tropical system, and then we had the heavy rains that followed it, and we just never really broke out into a big fire season across the west this year. But you can see some of the wildfire smoke from these two fires just yesterday. Now, since we're talking about wildfire smoke, I want to bring you up to speed on some stuff that's going on in Australia. This animation shows you in the Northern Territory, so this is Northern Australia, some of the large wildfires that have broken out here. There's several different videos of this on this website. It's one of my favorites here. It's the Sierra website from NOAA and NASA here. And what you can see is that some of these fires have burned a lot of acres. Now, just to be clear where you are, I want to show you what they call their cool season rainfall anomaly map from the Bureau of Meteorology, also called BOM. And this is the region where these fires are. So what's interesting is what I thought would be happening in California this year is actually happening in Australia. This whole corridor, if you go back all the way to April, shows wet conditions in through here. And this built up a lot of vegetation growth in this particular region. And all of that, as we get now into spring, where it's gone much drier in this area, is starting to burn. Now, these are bushfires. There's not a lot or any major agricultural efforts in this area. If you're unfamiliar with Australia, a lot of it's down here in Western Australia along the southern coast, like around Adelaide. And then you get into Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland. It's mostly this area into the to the east of that line that we see the major agriculture. Then that's not to say there isn't elsewhere, but where these fires are, this is not a main agricultural region. And while I've got you away from the United States, I did want to point out one thing about South America. Going back over the last 60 days, this is looking at a precipitation anomaly map. Now, this is using rain gauge data from the Climate Prediction Center. What I'm taking note of here is how dry it's been across the Amazon. Now, we've talked about this, right? We've talked about how the flow has come across like this. We've really robbed the area of good moisture flow like that. But the Amazon is apparently reaching extremely low levels right now, in some places record low. And I was just trying to find some gauge data for it, but I was unsuccessful. But I did want to show you some of the new satellite data. So this is kind of the mouth of the Amazon, the delta. And this is basically all of the flow that comes here, full of silt and other stuff from the river coming out of the Amazon forest. And the extent of this right now is actually lower than normal. Sometimes this gets all the way out here, which tells me that the flow coming from the river is still relatively low. And while we're talking about rivers, just to make a point here, let's go have a look right now at the Mississippi. I will cover this in tomorrow's in-depth long-range forecast, but just to show you right now, the Mississippi River, it did touch 12 feet below low stage. It's currently 11.64, so we're still down here in this record territory. So two of the largest river systems on Earth right now, the Amazon Basin, the Mississippi Basin, are seeing significant drought issues. All right, so let's get back to this central United States storm system. This is the one that's coming next week. And yesterday, the Climate Prediction Center released its risk of heavy snow outlook for the 26th through the 1st. And they've now identified a pretty large area in our northern plains. Now, we've been watching this very, very carefully, right? We've done the analysis where we looked at the multiple model runs, the dprog dt. We've looked at the ensembles. We're going to do that again here just to see what the latest is. So here is the 0Z forecast from the European models. Let's go ahead and take it out all the way 10 days. And what do you notice? The European model has now shifted the heaviest snowfall to be mostly throughout the Canadian prairie getting over here toward the Hudson Bay. It doesn't mean there won't be snow on the back side of it here, but the latest European model went pretty aggressive north. Now let's go and have a look at the transition. This was the 12Z run from yesterday. Montana, southern Saskatchewan into parts of Manitoba. Very, very heavy snow. And yeah, that'll be as far back as we can go with the European model. We only have a couple of runs to look at here. But it's good to compare the models. Let's go to the GFS. This is the newest GFS forecast. So this would be from the 6Z run. The 0Z run looked like that. The run before that, which had been 18Z yesterday, was putting massive snows into parts of Nebraska and Iowa and Wisconsin, parts of Minnesota. The run before it was the fun one. Like this would be the 12Z yesterday. This would have been the map that would have been used to make that forecast graphic that came out from the CPC, this one right here. And part of it, let me rephrase that, this would have been part of their analysis. And like, holy cow. So I just want you to see that this was a forecast at yesterday's 12Z run, and by last night's 0Z run, it did this. And then this is what the latest run looks like. So I need you to understand, even though you're going to see maps that you want to have happen. I mean, I got a lot of people yesterday that said, bring it. I want every bit of this. I'm ready for winter. I need you to know that there's still considerable uncertainty in what's going to happen next week. This is still a week away from us occurring. Now, on the other side of this, I do want to show you the probability maps. So our first one here looks at the probability of getting an inch in the next 10 days. And you notice that the European model is really kind of honed in on this particular region. That's not to say there won't be snow in Montana, coming down into Colorado, or even out here into parts of the plains. Like that is all certainly still possible. And certainly this is going to come over the Cascades and the Rockies and dump a bunch of snow. But if we look at the really heavy amounts, you can kind of identify that corridor right in through here. In addition to that, oops, hang on, I want to come back to this real quick. Can I flip you over real fast to the GFS ensemble? And that's where it's got the heaviest snow. So it's kind of in through this corridor. But the ensemble from the GFS is still not painting this as the highest probability event. So I just want to be clear. Is it a possibility? Oh yeah, it's a possibility to get the snow down here. But the greatest chances are going to be coming out of Montana all along the Front Range here and likely hit some corridor in here like this. I would take the more northerly track of this as of today, Thursday morning, as I've been doing this analysis. The other side of this is the rainfall, the wet side of this. And let's now go look at that map I kind of showed you just for a moment there. Last night's 0Z run from the GFS was extremely wet down in the southern plains, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Kansas, and really into the Texas Panhandle. And it brought a corridor right in through here of heavy rain. What you're getting in New England, this is actually happening now. We'll talk more about that in a few seconds. But from the 0Z run, this was the one that was run last night, to the newest one, the 6Z, it's now really expanded that. And it's got the heavier snow to the north. It's got this all coming east. And it's got heavy rains in the Cascades, and snow in the Cascades. That's the newest we've got from the GFS. So look how much this is still bouncing around. And this is the latest. Let's come back here. Sorry, I should have had this all queued up for you. That's the latest from the European model. So many model runs in my head. And it's got its wettest corridor here. And it's been most consistent with that. This was yesterday. So it's still putting something there. And the reason for this is because the model is attempting to produce a large area of high pressure over the southeast, just pumping this moisture in. And it's going to ride the backside of that high right in through here. Now that again was yesterday's 12Z. This is our newest run. This is where the snow is. Snow in the Rockies, snow in the Cascades. So there's just a lot that's still moving with this, and I want to be clear on it. Plus, we have to also factor in what's coming out here from Norma. How much is that moisture going to get in there? How is the high pressure cell going to respond when Tammy comes over close to it? All of these questions still need to be answered. So let's go do the ensembles one more time. This is the probability of an inch in the next 10 days. So even though you saw all that heavy rain in the operational run, the models are still 50 to 80% in this area for having the heaviest rainfall, better chance of getting more than an inch. And the newest GFS ensemble for the same time period, it's just a bit farther into the southern plains right in through here. So there's still, just a tremendous amount of time to wait on this. And if you're curious, we've got two other competing factors. We have Norma here and Tammy there, so in the tropics. And we're expecting Norma, to come up toward the Baja late this week. This is 3 days from now. And then through the weekend and early next week, be starting to get into Mexico. And we're curious how much Tammy is going to come up and get pushed away by the big ridge that's going to sit over the southeast. By the way, with Tammy, we only have two names left on the list, which would be V and W as the last two letters to use. But right now, Tammy is expected to come out here to be, Cat 1 or Cat 1 hurricane, All right, where's the wave that's going to create the big system? This is a top-down view. Currently, part of its momentum and speed is here. It's also tucked into this wave and this one. All three of these things over the next 7 days are going to work together after they all get blocked up in the Pacific to drop deep troughs into the western United States. So I'm just telling you something right now. Nothing is settled about this system next week. Like nothing. So even though you see these maps, and they'll get new ones every time there's a new run come out, and people will post them and talk about them, just be aware that nothing is settled. We haven't even yet gotten this thing into this, around North America yet. It's not even here. All right, so what do we know? We know that the North Pacific is going to get blocked up. There it is. And that block is what sends those waves in two pieces here and here. Now, the biggest change in the models is that these two waves are now not as connected as they were before. You remember me showing you this earlier in the week? We saw the base of this trough way down here. This one was way out ahead, and they were getting coupled, and they were going to orbit, and it was going to be just a monstrous system. The newest model runs don't even do that. They actually drop this deep low down here over California, keep the wave to the north here, and then still open this large ridge to the east, which means dynamically we've weakened these systems, and they're not working together. This would explain why there's the now more northerly track of the snow in the European model. This also helps pull more of enormous moisture out, and this is why the European model is so much wetter in this area. It's these two waves not working together. Now, it still produces a system, and I just want to point out that all the way out there to day 10, what did we not lose? Our high over low block. That's got to be watched for the end of the month and all the way into next month as well. I think that's going to keep much of the east with cooler shots of air. I think it's going to keep the central United States active with systems. I think it's going to keep the Northwest active with systems as well. So all of that is still yet to be settled in this pattern. We're only out 10 days. I do want to make a point about the models. Yesterday, we watched the European model just plummet in its skill score, and it bounced back up this morning. The GFS has kind of been down here in red. So right now, the European model has got the better handle on the pattern, but it's been highly volatile during this time period. So let's have a look at the individual model runs. We're going to start off with the European model. Let's kind of piece this together. Here's the low I just showed you on satellite a few minutes ago, coming through the central U.S. over the Great Lakes, working its way by Friday midday, later in the day, into a coastal system. And this is going to be producing some, really wet conditions across parts of the east, late Friday, getting into Saturday, and then into the day on Sunday. So that low curls up. Now behind it, we got to watch this high pressure cell. We got to watch Norma, which is sitting and spinning here, and then the next system coming into the northwest. That's the big one. So this is Sunday morning, playing through the day on Sunday into Monday, and here we go. That high pressure cell has now occupied the East Coast. And it's going to continue to slide in this direction, and it's going to open up the Gulf. Now, it's going to open up the Gulf to pull flow like this, and at the same time, the Pacific's going to enter like that, which is going to take the moisture from Norma and have it go right in the middle. So while this happens, this is where the southerly wave, remember, the one that's down here, is kicking up all of this. The northerly wave disconnected is what's hitting the northwest right now, and this is next Tuesday afternoon. What will we need to watch? Well, there could be a corridor of extremely heavy rain in through this area midweek next week while the bigger system loads here. This will be moisture from Norma. Now, there is the possibility that this shifts this direction or this direction and it could weaken. But this is the latest evidence that we've got right now. What will determine where that heavy rainfall is the position of this high pressure cell. Wherever it moves around, this follows the periphery. Now, instead of there being one deep, deep low, there's going to be two, one from the northern wave, one from the southern wave. And they're not coupled anymore. So as you go from Wednesday into Thursday, the first low stays to the south, the second low goes to the north, and that's where all the snow is now. But behind this, there's going to be some upslope flow against the Rocky Mountains, and that's what's going to make for extremely windy conditions in the northern plains, and also the snow here in Montana. And then that system curls up right over the Hudson Bay, and it becomes a monster. So massive cool down behind this, big time, very cold air, heat out ahead of it, heavy rain, and possibly the risk of strong to severe storms with this. And that's just all the way out there to Friday, October 27th. And you see following it, the models are trying to kick off another system. So what I find most interesting is right out here about hour 1, let's call it 174, the split between the two systems. Let's go see what the GFS has to say. So the GFS has the same low curling up here over parts of eastern Canada and New England this weekend. Pretty good model agreement. Got the timing of that. It then pulls the moisture from Norma. It was here. It's now sitting over Texas. And then this would be next Monday. And notice, where are the systems in the GFS? It's kind of lost it. Like, there's a low here, but it's nowhere near as deep as it is in the Euro. And there's a low already here in the Euro, and it's no longer as deep as it was forecast by the European model. But the ridge is in the same spot, which means we end up getting the heavier rain corridor in through here. Now, just note that the European model had this farther to the west and north. The GFS has got it tucked into here with most of its rain pretty far to the south. So this is out here at Wednesday. And by Thursday, well, remember a moment ago I said let's compare things at hour 174 to show you how far the models are off right now. This is a week from now, next Thursday. That's the GFS solution. There's the European. So when I tell you nothing is settled yet, it's because the wave has not been moving over North America. We haven't sampled it well enough. We don't know what's going on yet. And that's all we got in the models. I'm tending toward this solution, the European solution, but I can't rule out the GFS bringing in this high pressure center faster. Could be there. So it kicks off a more southerly system. Therefore, it brings the snow farther to the south with ice and big time cold behind it. They at least both agree on that. So can we look at the ensembles and make some sense of next week? I think all we can say is there's a system in here, and it's going to be wet. It's in all three models. And remember, this first hits late in the next 7-day time period, the Northwest first. So when you look at this and you say, wait a minute, the Northwest is dry now? Well, that's after the system rolls through. All right, we keep mentioning the temperatures, and don't look at my snow maps, especially the European. It's not right. That's last year's snow map, okay? But let's go back and talk about temperatures. Our frost risk, this is early next week. This is the system that follows it. So if I just show you, let's blow that up. This is NDFD data, so this is good. What we've got here is Sunday morning, getting into Monday morning. Look how cold it gets around the eastern Great Lakes, the Appalachian Mountains, and then eventually into New England. So that's where that frost risk comes from, that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Big warm-up following this. That's the next large system coming through. And let's look at the high temperatures now. Here's today's highs, getting into tomorrow, getting into Saturday and Sunday. So keep it cool in this area. But watch the huge warm-up that's going to resurge right back in the middle part of the country. So there's heat now, a little bit of cool down over the weekend, but then heat comes back early next week. This is the warm sector that's going to open up ahead of this big system next Tuesday, Wednesday. And there's the really cold air coming in behind this. You can see it really well by going to the ensembles. There's your next 5 days. There's day 5 through 10. Look at that cold air getting stored up here. And day 10 through 15, it races through. So it looks right now like we're going to go after a pretty cold Halloween in this whole area of the country. If it's going to be anywhere that still might be warm, maybe down here in the southeast or maybe in the southwest. But the rest of the country's got a cold Halloween coming up. So if you haven't made your costume yet, consider the forecast in that. All right. Last couple things here. I want to give you a quick update on the long range. We're going to talk about this tomorrow. The European model for November continues to be wet west coast, west central, and west southeast. In fact, there's not a real large dry area in November. We're expecting pretty energetic jet, which means a lot of momentum and speed coming across the Pacific. And I want to give you an update on South America. This is a 5-day sliding window of average precipitation anomalies. We know that under this dry weather for the next 5 days here, it's going to get quite hot. But what we do note is that wet conditions are now forecast for Argentina, desperately needed. And then as we slide this forward, we see that late October rains are expected in the European model to return from Mato Grosso to Goiás over toward Minas Gerais and then into southern Brazil. So we're expecting better rains in this area while the Amazon continues to stay dry. So it'll be interesting to watch how this map changes, because we are expecting decent rain to come into parts of Argentina. That's not going to undo the long-standing drought, but it'll improve it. And we're expecting this area to see better rains once we get past the next 5 days. All right, that's all I got for you today. We'll talk again tomorrow morning. Have a good one. Thank you.